Welcome back to the Ron Talks Tabletop Podcast, Supershow Sunday. And today I am talking with Jonathan Thew, but he is otherwise known as Hold the Line Harry. And he is part of this great Supershow community. And I want to get a chance to have a conversation with him, talk about his involvement and whatnot. And so we're just going to go ahead and get started here. So how and when did you get into Supershow the game?
Well, first of all, Ron, thanks for having me on the show. It's really great to be here to tell people about this wonderful game and how we do things here in the Deep South, and particularly in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I'm at. But I found Supershow. I discovered it about a month before DragonCon 2019. So about 4.5 years ago, I would say now, a long time ago. I was heavily into another tabletop game called Blood Bowl. Have you covered that at all on Ron Talks Tabletop? American football style game from Games Workshop?
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So I was a big Blood Bowl player. I would travel a lot. I'd go to the Chaos Cup up in Chicago, and I was actually listening to a Blood Bowl podcast. And the Blood Bowl podcast had someone on to talk about Supershow. And that was the salty sailor Mark Perry out of Las Vegas, also known as the good friend of the alien invader. But he's a big Blood Bowl personality, and he spent a good 30 minutes on a Blood Bowl podcast. I don't remember exactly which one, but he was talking about Supershow. And as someone who had grown up watching wrestling in Europe, you can probably tell from my accent, those who aren't familiar with me, I'm not originally from the US. Grew up in Liverpool, England, but we had a lot of exposure mainly to WWF. We didn't get WCW, we didn't get the Indies, but we got all of WWF and latterly WWE wrestling over there. And as someone who had been a wrestling fan growing up and enjoyed games, I was, I thought, wow, a card game, a collectible card game where you basically simulate a wrestling match, that sounds like a lot of fun. I spoke with Mark, and he put me in touch with some of the guys who were going to be at DragonCon 2019. Most prominently, I was connected with a real legend in the LFF, Bob the Brain Dunn. Bob Dunn had never met me, never heard of me, never spoken with me. And he connected with me and he said, hey, the first day of DragonCon, you want to meet up and I'll teach you how to play? Easy as that. So I stayed in touch with him. I met up with him in an Irish pub in downtown Atlanta in DragonCon, and I learned how to play Supershow in a dark corner of an Irish pub with a pint of Guinness. He handed me a Kenny Omega deck, and I'm like, wow, Kenny Omega. and little did I know that in the room with me at the time was General Manager John Calais, Steve Resk, Samantha Joe Resk. Basically, all of the creators of this game were literally sitting at the table right next to me. So not only did I get to my first exposure to the game, I got to really be welcomed into the community, be taught how to play. I actually got to hang out and meet the creators of the game. The LEO at the time, Griff, who is now the Father Light, was there as well. And it was just amazing. And I think they all very quickly appreciated how into the game I was and how much I was enjoying it. And basically, DragonCon 2019 for me didn't really turn into DragonCon. It was literally 4 days of Supershow. I did the events. I hung out at the booth. I hung out and played. I met Practicite. Jeremy Steigerwald was there. And, he's now a longtime friend of mine, longtime tag partner. We played some tag together. We learned the game together. He played a little earlier than me. He played, I think, maybe for 6 months previous. But yeah, DragonCon 2019 was incredible. And it was a good time. I met John Polverino for the first time. He was there.
That's awesome. I love hearing these stories about how people get into games that I love, because I feel like it helps me, bond with people more. Like, I'm hearing all these great stories about how people are entering the game. I entered the game a few months ago, but I'm not here to talk about my story. I have other videos that talk a little bit about that and everything like that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm glad that your introduction to the game has been just as good, because I know you enjoyed a lot as well. So it's wonderful.
Yes. So speaking of just loving the game, what is it about the game that you love?
I think initially it was even more than the fact it was a game, it was the links to wrestling. And it was almost a throwback to my youth because I had spent many years not following wrestling, which is kind of weird because there's way more opportunity to follow wrestling living in the United States than when I lived in Europe. But I guess it just transitioned, once you get out of college, once you start work, met my wife, got married, I kind of drifted from wrestling a little bit. I guess when I decided I wanted to re-embrace wrestling, I thought doing it through a card game initially would be a good way to do it. And it was really the way it felt like a wrestling match. It was the whole, more than just the game. It was the personas. It was the theatrics mid game, before game, the promos, seeing the way that this community was almost like a role-playing element, even though it's not a role-playing game per se. I really enjoyed that. It felt like being in a wrestling match. Back then in 2019, the card effects and the card names were more interlinked even because there was a much smaller card pool, and it was so specific because it was, like if you'd throw a punch at someone, they'd actually stop it with a headlock. So it would be like the guy would throw the punch and he'd block it and then he'd get him in the headlock, like it was actually a wrestling match. So it was, the moves, the storytelling of the moves, and the fact that, these people all had personalities, they had personas, they were shooting promos, telling storylines, and I saw all of that at Dragon Con and beyond. And, very quickly, I don't just want to play this game. I want to be part of this game. I want to be part of this community, part of this storytelling. So, very soon after Dragon Con, I made arrangements to go to the next CAC that I'd heard about, which was up in Louisville, Kentucky, Plaid Saturday. I was all right. I'm going to make a persona. I'm going to be Hold the Line Harry. So I started shooting some introduction promos. I became Hold the Line Harry. And I had at my first CAC, I had a really strong run as the 24/7 hardcore champion there, which was at the time a new LFF belt. I had, I think, 11 defenses of the 24/7 hardcore title at Plaid Saturday using Merlin von Berlin. Little did I know, I was playing and beating like some of the best players in the game. Like I defended that title against John Pulverino. I defended that title against, at the time, he doesn't play anymore, but Pretty Boy Snow. I defended once against Steve Resk, and these are, amazing players. And, there were other pickup games as well.
And the creator of the game.
And the creator of the game, who we all know and love. In the end, I lost that title to one of the other legendary Hall of Famers. Pat Mulligan took that title off me at Plaid Saturday 2 using Icy Grip, one of the old characters, the Phantasm. Took it off me there. And then later, Steve had his amazing long run with Vanilla Gorilla, which may or may not be one of the reasons Vanilla Gorilla is banned in the state of Ohio. But who knows? These stories come and go. I digress, but there you go. I started telling you why I love the game so much, and I went into another wonderful memory. So it's all the memories that are created.
Yeah, exactly. And so, can I ask, how did the Hold the Line Harry persona came about?
Good question. Hold the Line Harry, I decided that I wanted a name that rang with alliteration. So I wanted it to roll off the tongue. I wanted it to be a something, something, something. And as a rugby player, because I grew up playing rugby, probably spent 15 years playing rugby. I felt it was all about, holding the line. It's all about, if you don't know rugby, you got to try and get over the gain line. A little bit like, in football, it's about progressing down the field, and the play breaks down. And the job on defense is to very much hold the line. And then I thought, okay, well, what name rings with Hold the Line? And I was like, well, Hold the Line Harry. My late great uncle's name was Harry, and I think he had passed maybe 3 or 4 years earlier. He was a World War II veteran. He was a bomber pilot. And I was like, you know what? I'll go for Harry, and a little bit of a tribute to him, family name. And it just rolls off the tongue. Hold the Line Harry. Yeah. So I became Hold the Line Harry. And now people call me Harry as much as they call me John, and I answer to it just as much. So it's kind of weird to have 2 names.
But I'm finding that's a more common occurrence in this community, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't bring you on to the podcast just to talk about you and your persona and all this kind of stuff, although all that stuff is interesting. You also have some involvement in the Super Show that I wanted to get a chance to talk to you about.
Yeah.
So, what is your involvement with the Super Show?
So I have volunteered for an enormous amount, and I enjoy it. I enjoy every minute of it. I mean, firstly, in the wrath of COVID, of course, hit us all. But as soon as COVID was done, I decided I wanted to really, on a national level, help promote the game where I could. So, for example, when they came back to Dragon Con for the first time, I reached out. I said, put me on the team. I'll help run events. And that first Dragon Con back after COVID was the BOSS, me and Jeremy. And we've kind of stuck with that Dragon Con team every year since. And then Origins, I volunteered for to be on the ring crew. They had a ring crew scheme where you would be on the ring crew. And then after that, Origins, based on all of that I'd kind of contributed and demoed and done, I was promoted to sort of be what at the time it's kind of a thing that's no longer around, but to be the ring crew leader, to sort of help organize the other volunteers and things like that. So I kind of coordinated a lot of that stuff. And then at the same time, I was really pushing the ACCW, which was our local Atlanta playgroup, which back then, in the months before COVID and then a little bit during COVID, and we did Zoom meetups. We did some Zoom events during COVID when we couldn't get together. We were a very small playgroup. I would say never more than 8 players. We had a pretty small core, sort of me, Jeremy, Downriver Drew. Jokerfish would come down from Asheville, North Carolina, because he was in Asheville at the time before he moved back up towards the Northeast. It was a pretty small crew, but we had a lot of fun. So and I've done a lot for the ACCW as well locally, and just carried on growing it as much as I can. And now I think we are, I'm going to say it live, I think we are probably the biggest regular meeting community in the community right now. I mean, we're getting 20 to 22 each month, which is incredible for a local play group. I'm very, very happy with where we are right now. It's amazing.
Yeah, I am super spoiled because I just started a game this year and I live here in Atlanta, and this has been my only local experience. And it's been great. I feel like I'm part of something special, I have to say.
I'm glad.
And I know that with the ACCW, we recently hosted create a competitor competition, and you were the coordinator of all of those efforts. So I didn't explain it, but I'll let you explain it. But what things did you take into account for the scheduled events and the logistics of this huge event?
Yeah, these CACs, and this is the second that we ran. We had the Enter the Final Dungeon CAC in 2022, and then the Level Up CAC this year, 2023. Going back even before that, when we were that small group of 8, like our primary goal was to host a CAC. Like we'd talk about it when we were just a tiny group, and we would try and work out how we could get up to that sort of critical mass to be able to run a CAC for locals and have the draw for people to come from all over the country. That was years in the making. It's not something that you can just sort of click your fingers and do. It's just been amazing to get there and not do it once, but do it twice. And I'm sure we'll do it 3, 4, 5 times every year, the first week of November, wherever we're at. And hopefully it'll continue to be Level Up Games because they've been great hosts for us recently. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the planning, the first thing you really have to think about is the business side. I actually don't know how some of these other CACs do it, because mechanically, it's $1,000 prize plus the commissioning of the promos, and then you take into account the number of people coming and the number of players, and really you need to have confidence that you're going to have 30 to 40, if not more, players in attendance for the store themselves to break even, because you work with the store when you organize something like this. I mean, it's some time and energy comes out of my pocket, but when it comes down to the money, it's the store that puts that up. The store pays for the event, the store pays for the created content, and et cetera, et cetera. So from a schedule point of view, you've got to make sure that it's going to work that way first, and then it's about putting on a good show. And to me, putting on a good show is a good competitive event with a smattering of featured matches in between. The Level Up CAC had that. Just this month, the Final Dungeon CAC a year before had that as well. It's been unusual to have featured talent at the CACs. I think a couple of other CACs nationally have done it, but I decided when I arranged the TFD CAC, the Final Dungeon one, I wanted a big name. I wanted a big local and potentially regional talent there to add to the draw, to add to the people. So, we've been speaking with Cruel at Southern Honor Wrestling, which is our local promotion. At the time, he was a MLW wrestler in a big feud with Jacob Fatu, so he had a national presence as well as a local presence. He'd just become, in fact, interestingly, he got even bigger after I booked him, because after I booked him for the CAC, he then became the IWTV World Champion, which was a big deal. So we had the Southern Honor IWTV World Champion at our first Final Dungeon event. We actually had him, learning the game a little bit, playing the game a little bit. He immediately said he wanted to be in the game. So I worked with him on that. And then I worked with Steve and Griff and, getting Cruel into the game and working on his finishes and his gimmick and things like that. Yes, I'm sorry, everyone. It's my fault. When I gave him a steel chain gimmick or recommended to Steve that he should have a steel chain gimmick, there were not so many steel chains. So Cruel the Destroyer is now dominant. But anyway, again, I've digressed because I enjoy talking about this game so much, and I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. Where were we at, Ron?
Yeah, we're talking about the logistics and scheduling and whatnot.
I was kind of on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask another question for you folks that don't know. I mean, I realize that most of my subscribers are here for role playing game or board game content. You might be listening to a Super Show video for the first time. Can you explain a little bit about what a Create a Character tournament is about?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's definitely a national tier tournament, and I feel confident calling it that because people will travel from all over the country to it. The best players from all over the country will come to these CAC events. And that's because the grand prize is the ability or the package to create your character, your persona in the game. And many of the good players, there are people in this community that have won 4 or 5 CACs. I'm sure there's a list on the Facebook group of those who have won many of them. They have created many characters as a result of this. And normally that's a package that costs, anywhere between $900 and $1,000. So it's a pretty big value prize that these people are coming for to play in. And definitely once you fall in love with the game, the next step is that you will have a desire and a wish to create your persona in the game so that not only you can play as your persona on a role-playing basis, actually using your character in matches and win titles with your character, but also it's pretty cool that someone can go on a website and buy a copy of you. Which is kind of nice. Hold the Line Harry has had 2 print runs. Ninja Hummingbird, my daughter's character, has had 2 print runs. Fire Flash was a Kickstarter exclusive. He's my son. A year ago, and Fire Flash is going to be getting a new print run with his new finish that's coming out. He's going to be a spotlight character in this upcoming Kickstarter in issue 6. So it's just so great to have characters in the game that you have created or that you've been part of creating, and that's why it's such a sought after prize.
Yeah, indeed it is. I'm looking forward to my opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen one way or the other.
I'm excited. What is Ron's persona going to be? Do we have something in the works?
Yes, I've actually teased it a couple of weeks ago. I have a little Facebook page for it. Mr. Rumble has not been formally introduced to the LFF, but he is coming soon.
There you go. I like it. And you know what? This is what I love about our new blood in the ACCW, including, yourself, Adrian, the chiropractor, all these relatively new players. Not only are they embracing the game, but they are shooting promos already. They're creating storylines already. And that is the energy that makes these communities so fun. And that's to me, all. Listeners, this is amazing. We've been talking for about 30 minutes, and we haven't even told you the rules of the game. We haven't even talked about what you do in a game of Super Show with cards and dice. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes this game so good. It is the community and it is the storytelling, without even talking about the mechanics of the game, which are great and very easy to learn, by the way. But it's the big picture. TM.
Yeah.
That's a faction here in the LFF.
Yeah. So I'm going to link to my review of the game when this podcast comes out, so that you can learn the rules of the game. It's very simple. But that's a very good point. So I just wanted to get back to talking about the CAC. What were the best parts, the highlights of the CAC for you, and why? What really worked?
Honestly, I was just really happy with. I love it when a plan comes together. In the words of Hannibal from the A-Team, it's. I always try to challenge myself and try to push the envelope a little bit about how much I could fit in. When the schedule of booked matches and the fact it's going to be a 6 rounds of Swiss with a lunch break, a special guest, and everything, a number of people said to me, "You're crazy. Like, you'll never fit all of that in. You'll never be. It's not going to work." So it's really nice to to visualize that, to plan that out. When I use what most event planning people use, a simple Excel spreadsheet. But knowing that, looking at those details and knowing that I can make it work, and then pulling it together and everything running smoothly. Even the herding cats element that sometimes comes, trying to get everyone back after their lunch break and where they need to be for the next round of matches and things. But it's just so fulfilling to plan it and then have it work. I mean, it's very fulfilling. I mean, last year, the final dungeon CAC, it was the event of the year. It won the award for event of the year. And I would hope that we're going to be in the running with the Level Up CAC this year. I think we probably are, because it was just a great event attended by many, and everyone had a lot of fun, which is everything you need from a CAC.
Well, that is true. It was awesome. It should. I had a blast. At least people were talking about it. It's got a lot of buzz after the event, so that was cool. I have to ask this question because you coordinated an event and there's logistics, and like I know, having been an event organizer in the past, there's always something that after the fact you think, okay, I need to make a change to make this aspect better, even if the event went smoothly. What would you change for the next CAC or other major event that you would run?
I would say there's only one thing that I felt I would have done differently if I could, and I don't know if I could have. So the great thing about the TFD CAC, the previous year, was when our special guest came in, when our special guest Cruel joined us. We had a decent PA system. We had him come in through the back. The lights went down. It was a full-on wrestler entrance. His music was blasting super loud, and it was a big deal that he came in, right? And he came in during the round immediately before lunch. So he came in during the round immediately before lunch. Everyone was in the middle of that round. Everyone was playing. And then during the lunch break, people stuck around and did their selfies and their autographs and their meet and greet and stuff, and then they grabbed a bite to eat. This year, because our special guest, Sunny Days, aka Dylan Freimer, is his GM name. He's one of the owners of Southern Honor Wrestling, and he's the booker there, and one half of Happy Madness, and a great wrestler. I really enjoy his work in the ring as well. He's been on AEW also, and he's pretty big. Sonny came in because he had a match. He had a show that night. He basically came to us in the afternoon so that he could go straight to his show from our event. So the timing made sense for him to arrive at a certain time. Sadly for me, and I think for maybe the lack of pop that we got, is that his arrival time coincided with lunch. So even though we had, I can't remember the exact number we had at the CAC, probably close to 50. While we had a CAC of 50 players, I'm going to say there was probably only 6 people at the tables when he came in because everyone had gone for lunch. And I was like, oh, that's a bit disappointing. We missed that pop. So I think I would work, that would be one schedule adjustment I would do. I would try to coincide the special guest attendee pop with actually a time when I can guarantee that everyone is going to be there at that time. But it worked great. I mean, it still worked out fine. He did well. He moved a lot of T-shirts and 3x8s, and he did a lot of selfies and FaceTime, and got some pictures with everyone. It was, his attendance was awesome. It was great. I just wish that almost as much for him as for the people. You know, I think it's nice when you book someone that when they turn up, they get a pop. You know, that's, to me, that's kind of the respect to the talent. And I felt bad that I couldn't give him that. The same as we gave Cruel, because I wish, and if anyone has it on video, this is a call out to people who were at the final dungeon CAC. If anyone has Cruel's entrance to that CAC on video from last year, from November 2022, please send a copy of it to me, because it's one of my favorite memories and I don't have any video evidence of it. I'm sure someone recorded it.
Yeah, I would like to see that. So my final question is something I always like to ask people that I interview. John, what is something interesting that people may not know about you?
I mean, I think I actually maybe even hinted it on it earlier, and it's probably the fact I have this accent and I actually played American football. So yeah, when I talk about football, I mean the football where we throw the ball. Okay. I don't mean the football where we kick the ball.
Okay.
But yeah, and again, I actually did it with Hold the Line Harry. For so long, Hold the Line Harry was a proud English persona, you know, the rugby man, as the Uber star would call me. It got to the point, I mean, ever since moving here to the United States, you know, I naturalized as soon as I could. I'm a proud American. My wife and my kids are American. I consider myself an American before a British person. You know, when I pledged allegiance, I renounced the Queen, as it was at the time, now the King. So yeah, I decided I needed to make Hold the Line Harry and a proud American now. So he has his United States rugby jersey instead. So yeah, I think when people hear me talk, they're like, oh, who's this British guy? But I am actually a proud American. Hold the Line Harry is an American. And when I talk about football, I actually mean the football where we throw the ball. And I enjoyed a day of it yesterday on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so did I. I was curious as to why you were into American football. You clearly have an accent. I was assuming English, but
Yep, I grew up in Liverpool. I followed Liverpool soccer team while I lived there. I mean, I was a Liverpool fan, of course, as everyone locally was. But I never really played soccer, at least not competitively. I played rugby competitively through school, through high school, even after high school, college, and then I actually found an American football team that was starting up, and I played American football for 2 years out there as well for the Merseyside Nighthawks, who actually became a Division 1 team after I left. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Who would have known? That's why I asked this question. So I just wanted to say finally, really thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been very enjoyable having this conversation with you this morning here.
Absolutely. Let's give a little shout out to Level Up Games before we go. If there's anyone here in the Atlanta area that wants to learn this, we meet monthly at Level Up Games in Duluth now. So their Facebook page always has the events, and I'm sure if you're a follower of Ron, he can put a notation on his page when we have these events, and we can all get connected, help grow the community.
I actually live very close to the store. More often than not, if I'm going in there and spending an amount of time in there, I have Supershow decks with me, so I can teach you the game.
Excellent. Yeah, and because it's a game that's sometimes hard to find other play groups, we have people that travel. I mean, last year we had Rowdy Ron and Nick Nimble come in from North Carolina on a monthly basis to play with us. You know, we had Jokerfish coming from Asheville, Rhaegar the Dragon God coming from North Carolina. We have people coming from Alabama. You know, it's a good draw, but I think the advantage of having one big meet each month with a smattering of other meets in between, that one big meet is, people will travel for. So we always get a good turnout and a good show. And I guess if this goes out before the 2nd of December, we are having a launch of the next set, the old school 2 set, on the 2nd of December at Level Up. So that will be a great time to come and check it out. It's going to be a sealed product event. So even if you're brand new, everyone's going to be on the same playing field.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you once again for being on the podcast here. And until next time, folks, see you later.
Thanks, Ron.